Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another great episode of So You're Ready to Date. And even inside of that, going into our mini series of dating through the holidays. Today, we are going to bring you a fun topic, or maybe not such a fun topic. Who knows? But we're going to dive into what it looks like when you don't have a significant other and may or may not want to put your dating on pause during the holiday season. We're coming up on the holiday season and there's a lot of added stress. So what does dating look like through the holiday season if you are not in a relationship that is currently going somewhere? So today we're going to talk about first dates and should we, shouldn't we, and what does that look like?
As if the topic of first dates weren't already kind of sticky enough, we're going to add the minefield of holidays. Yay. So with, like Angie said, with the fast approaching holidays like Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, all of that stuff, we thought we would kick off this mini series talking about, do we need to pause our dating life as we come into the season? Or if we're not ready to do that, how can we navigate this in a way where, again, it still feels fun, it feels exciting, but we don't get bogged down with a lot of the expectations that may come with the holiday season?
So I think you brought up a great first point and first question. Should we or shouldn't we? Should we pause? Should we keep going? How do we make up our mind? So I think that gives us a good point to dive into. And the number one point I want to make before we talk about anything else is going back to something else that you said, Lisa. It should be fun and exciting. And if it's not fun and exciting, it may be time to push pause and step back from that for just a moment. If you are somebody that has a lot of stress through the holiday season and needs the extra time for self-care, taking care of yourself, and decompressing, dating may not be a good idea through the holidays. And it may be okay to push pause for a month or a month and a half as you get through Thanksgiving and whatever other holidays you traditionally celebrate through the new year.
I would also say, too, if your family lovingly wants to interrogate you at every holiday about who you're seeing, it might be in your best interest to say, hey, I'm taking a break until the first of the year, to give yourself that out, to not have to talk about yet again to this aunt you see only once a year why you're not married yet, why you're not in a relationship. So, taking it fully into account, whether it works best for you, whether it's just easier on your life when you're at these parties and visiting family, what is in your best interest. So there's no hard and fast rule. It's always going to be what serves you best.
Yes. And on the other hand, if it is fun and exciting, something that you can bring into your life and you have room for it in your life through the holiday season, then absolutely feel free. Go ahead. There is nothing wrong with initiating a first date through the holiday season. My significant other and I have been together for going on 5 years the week before Thanksgiving. So we did the first date minefield and we did the navigating the holiday seasons together when we first got together, and it was a brand new relationship. And there is absolutely nothing wrong with that if you are still going out and it still feels fun and exciting and you can bring that into your life without a lot of added stress.
I'd say too, that time of year has some fun activities, some different activities that maybe you obviously aren't going to see throughout the whole year. So if there's something fun and exciting, you've always, like a concert, there's always tons of like Christmas concerts and light shows. And so this could be a really great opportunity for you to, again, step out of your comfort zone, find some really fun activities that are new and different and unique for a first date. So yeah, it can go either way. We're going to talk a little bit about maybe what not to do and what places not to go on that first date. But yeah, there are plenty of ways to be really romantic and really fun around the holiday season. So maybe keeping that in mind, if you're like, it'd be fun to ask this person to something like that. So keeping that in your back pocket.
Right. I think some of those fun things there's more available during this time of year than there might be other times of year to go out and do something a little bit different. Taking taking a look at holiday lights is always a fun activity, something that you can do. Maybe not on that first date if you're meeting publicly, but as if you are still new in that relationship and kind of going through, that's one that I always love to do, is take a tour around and go look at the holiday lights. And what a romantic date idea for you to do if you've not had that experience in the past.
Going ice skating, finding a good place for hot chocolate. See, there are all of these. If you're kind of wanting to get cozy with somebody, what better way than to maybe find that nice little restaurant that has a fireplace and have a drink in front of there. There are all these places where, like, oh, I got to get closer to you. It's cold out. So you can use this to your advantage with everybody's full consent and permission. But yeah, taking advantage of some of the unique offerings that come about during the holiday season to really, maybe there's stuff that you've always wanted to do but felt strange doing them by yourself. Bring this person along, see if they're up and game and up for this.
Right. However, on the flip side, some of those things maybe you should still do by yourself. Let's talk places that maybe you don't want to take a first date during the holiday season. And a big one that came up was one that you had said, Lisa, when you're talking about company or corporate holiday gatherings.
Yes. This is maybe not to bring the time to bring somebody that you're not 100% familiar with, who you don't know how maybe they handle their eggnog. So I think, it's, you always are trying to put your best forward at your business events. And so not having someone that you're not 100% aware of and familiar with, I think puts everybody at a disadvantage, because as the person on the date, you're like, I don't really know this person well. And now I'm being introduced to 15 other people who there's a very good likelihood I'll never see again or remember their names. And I think it just puts everybody at a disadvantage and in an uncomfortable spot, that a first date is nerve-wracking enough. I don't need to meet your boss.
Right. Or if you go to places and do things. So this is how my significant other was accidentally thrust into meeting my family, is we went to a holiday play and my family happened to be there. So another two option of places to avoid would be places that maybe your family frequents. I wasn't thinking about it, someplace that I know that my family was going to be or going to go, and they happened to be there, and all of a sudden it's a really awkward introduction. And that wasn't our first date, but it very well could have been, because it was public, it was community theater, it was plays, performance, live theater, which I love to go see and go do, and my family does too. And we ended up, like I said, running into them, and it was a little bit awkward. So knowing where your family is going to be, if you live in the same area or vicinity as your family, and maybe avoiding places that they frequent, or know that you're going to be, or know that they're going to be during that time, might also be helpful, because that's not the only time I've run into my family on a early relationship or very, very first date, which is awkward.
Well, I think sometimes there's this tendency that when you go out and you run into people that you know, especially if you're like, oh, join us, then all of a sudden you're talking to the people you know, and you're not talking as much to the person that you're on the date with. So I think those first few dates very much need to be you and this other person, because the whole point of dating is to get to know this other person. And when you start to too early throw like people that either you know or that he knows into the mix, it becomes easier to not pay attention to the person that you're actually on a date with and focus on the people you already know, you're already comfortable with. I know what I'm going to talk to so-and-so about, but I don't know this person yet. So just being mindful of, if you're going to bring group people in there, that you're going to have enough time, energy, and focus for the person that you're actually on the date with.
Yes. And if you're going to those company events, if you're going to those corporate events, or you're going to a play that you know your family frequents, put a little forethought into it and maybe bring your best friend instead of your brand new date.
Right. I mean, some of this can all be solved too by saying, hey, I want to do this thing. There's a high probability that these people are going to be there. Are you still interested? And if they're like, yep, I'm still game, then I think you're free to go. But like you said, surprising people with stuff like that, I think just for me would put a bad taste in my mouth about the experience with that person being like, I feel like I was ambushed having to meet all of these people when that's not what I was expecting.
And even when it happens by accident, I had another first date. It was not during the holiday season. And I know this is focused on the holiday season, but it was a very first date. And we were going out for lunch. And I went into a little place that I had never been into before. So I had no reason to expect my family to be there. And they happened to be there. And suddenly I'm left with, well, this is my friend Joe, or this is my friend John. And it was very uncomfortable and awkward. But at the same time, I'm really glad that I didn't introduce this person any other way, because that date didn't go anywhere with somebody I didn't click with and never saw again.
Yes, but at some point we're going to have to talk about that too. When do we start calling them? What are we going to call them? Because I think that can be a whole episode in and of itself. Is like, what are we calling this, and what am I calling you? So for now, we're sticking with friend, right? This is my friend so and so.
Right. And there's another complication that kind of comes up. Let's say, like I said, I started seeing my significant other a couple of days before Thanksgiving. We had our first date the first night. We had fun, so we decided to go out on a second date the second night, which at some point I will tell you guys the story of how it wasn't a date, but that's okay. Went out on our second date the second night, and he was flying out the next day to go spend time with his family. So quite literally right over Thanksgiving, we met and started dating and getting to know each other. And some of the things that came up as we realized that we were going to take this a little bit further, and we had a lot of communication over the Thanksgiving weekend, was, okay, do we celebrate the same holidays? And how is that going to work? And what does that really look like as far as family? And what are the expectations on both sides? And so knowing, even if you're still on that first date, you don't have to think ahead. You only have to be worried about what's happening right now, because when you worry about what's happening in the future, that's a lot of anxiety and a lot of stress that you don't need. But knowing yourself well enough to know that you will be prepared to have conversations should you hit it off, and you are going to develop a relationship through this season.
Right. And I think taking cues from your date. If you're having a first date during this holiday season, are they saying, hey, I'm doing this and this for Christmas? Hey, my family, if they're sharing stories like that, that's a good way to start to have like maybe that first toe into the conversations of being like, okay, what are some fun family traditions that you have? You can start to talk about that. But yeah, like you said, Angie, knowing really securely what it is that you do during the holiday season and what is important to you. Then when you start to have maybe a little deeper conversation about gift giving and how do we spend the holidays and stuff like that, it gets a little easier to negotiate some of those things because you know what you want and expect, and hopefully your partner does too.
Right. And this isn't worried about having conversations for situations or scenarios that have not developed yet. This is about understanding where you stand. It can change. You can make different decisions, but if you start dating at Thanksgiving, or if you start dating at the middle of December, you personally, assuming that the relationship is right, would you make the decision to bring them home, to introduce them to friends, to introduce them to family, or would you not? And knowing that can make you a lot more comfortable moving forward through this season, just because you know that when the conversation comes up, whether you initiate it or they initiate it, you're going to say, I'm not ready for that yet. And if you need help on understanding how to tell when you're ready or how to have those conversations, go back, check out our season 1 episode on meeting the family. But if you're determined and you're decided and you know where you stand, it makes having those conversations a lot easier. And it takes a lot of that worry out of anything progressing, because it gives you the freedom to progress forward and schedule another date and go on another date and continue to get to know somebody without having that pressure of, oh my gosh, where is this going to be and how am I going to have to handle it in 3 weeks?
Right. Because we talked about this in the earlier episodes last season about like managing our expectations. We're like, this is a date. Again, we are not putting up a Pinterest board of wedding ideas and hoping to be engaged on Christmas Eve. This is, we're pumping the brakes on that. We're getting through this first date to see if I want to do a second date with said person. And I know that the holidays add this extra pressure, but I had this thought as you were talking, Angie, I'm like, do you want to have to crop this person out of family pictures? Is it time to take them home for that? So using that as kind of your litmus test of like, am I ready to be questioned about this person if in 2 weeks this whole thing kind of fizzles out? So I think some of that kind of plays into where your mindset is. I'm like, is this really something I'm ready to have all kinds of discussions about? Because if your family's anything like mine, you've got 1 or 2 people who are going to be nosy about stuff in the most, I'm sure, loving way possible. But taking into account, when are you truly comfortable having to have conversations with everybody in your family about this new person, and knowing that if it's a brand new relationship, you still have plenty of time. You don't always have to introduce people right away if that's not where your mental space is.
But I think I agree with you 100%. So not a but, I'm not negating any of that. I think having a decision, a firm decision, even if you change it, takes so much pressure off. So I like that litmus test and saying, do I want to crop them out of family pictures? Because, there's a good chance that hopefully they are the one, but you don't know if it's been a first date, right? You have to go through a lot of first dates some people have to go through a lot of first dates before you get to that right one. Some people don't. But let's talk about the law of averages here. 80% of people are going to go through more than one person. Now, there is love at first sight. I get that. But are you ready to have those conversations? And if the answer is no today, then it is okay to make that decision that the answer is going to be no until after January 1st. And if that changes, that's great. It can totally change. It's like deciding what you're going to have for dinner for the next week and having it all planned out so that there's no stress. But then you get home on Tuesday night and decide you want tacos instead of spaghetti. It's okay.
That's that's the perfect analogy for that whole thing, where it's like, yes, you have the best of intentions and you planned it all out. And you're like, nah, I'm ordering pizza. So you're going to call an audible on the whole thing anyway. But sometimes getting to that space of, okay, I don't have to think about it anymore. I don't have to be anxious about it. I don't have to worry about it. A decision has been made. If it changes, it changes. But for right now, at least I know where I stand.
Yes. And in my opinion and in my experience, that is the best way to navigate something like dating through the holidays or dating through the holiday season, is just to make those decisions and understand where I stand right now today, and let that be okay if nothing changes. And if nothing changes, that is okay. And if something changes, I can make another decision when that happens, but I don't have to think about it until that happens.
Which I think is a good rule of thumb when we talk about gifts this time of year as well, because not only is there this pressure of maybe introducing them to like family and friends and these big gatherings, but there's also this idea of like, do I get this new person a gift? Is that an expectation? Are they going to get me something and then I'm not going to have anything for them? So finding that way to navigate that as well, I think can be a decision. If you like to give gifts, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. If they've mentioned something, I would honestly keep it fairly low key and not spend over like $20, because I think you get to a certain point where like, this woman just spent $200 on me and I've had 2 dates on her. So I think there's some perspective to be had there. But again, finding like, if you really love giving people gifts and you feel like you have a real knack for it, then yeah, if they've said something and you can figure out a way to give them a nice gift and it feels good to you without the expectation that it be returned. Because I think that's sometimes where we get in trouble. You're like, but I gave you something. Now I want something. The gift giving has to be, I'm doing this because I really want to do it and not because I'm expecting something reciprocal from it.
Yes. I think we have an episode coming up, so I will refrain from getting all excited about how to navigate those murky waters too. Again, this was a situation that I had to navigate in my first season and was a little bit tricky. So I'm going to get very excited about giving all of you listeners out there some ideas on how to navigate that. And also, but we're talking about gift giving from the perspective of that's what's standard in our life. And so maybe that's also standard in your life, but maybe that's not standard in the person's life that you are starting to date. Or maybe that's not standard in your life and you're worried about the person that you're starting to date and how they're going to feel about that whole gift giving mentality, no matter what holiday celebration you engage in. And so I think that's okay to have an idea in your head of how you're going to approach that. And there may become a time for a conversation about that, but to understand that if you're giving a gift, to not have an expectation of it being reciprocated, because you don't really know the other person well enough to know where they stand on things. So know that you're doing it because you enjoy doing it and not necessarily because you're expecting something in return.
And I think we brought it up in our banter episode last season, which was episode 5, if I remember. It's okay to like use the elephant in the room. Just flat out say, if you're like date 3 and you're like, hey, I know this is really new. I know that we're close to Christmas, but I think it's best if we just don't expect gifts this time. If we're still together and we're still, doing this thing next year, we can talk about it, but don't be afraid to just call out the elephant in the room and just put it out there, because they may be just as relieved that you brought it up so that you can have this identical expectation of they're not doing anything, I'm not doing anything. It's just enough that we're trying to find some time to spend together.
Yes, a very good point. And you can bring it up jokingly. You can bring it up as a serious topic, like, hey, sit down, I got to talk to you about something. And you can bring it up flat out by talking about what you do traditionally with your family and helping them to understand your family traditions and bring it up. But it is totally okay to address the elephant in the room.
Just tell them, hey, I'm your only gift this year. And then you can have a great laugh and make it kind of lighthearted. But like, yeah, I think it's a great way to start to lay out those expectations so that nobody is trying to figure out what the other person wants, needs, or is trying to do here.
Yes. And you're not trying to spill your whole life. You're not trying to force somebody into a commitment, but it is okay to have conversations about your expectations and to bring those conversations up and say, hey, this is new. I understand this time of year is a little bit tricky for dating. And so I just want to be really clear up front that even no matter where we're at, I have things that I'm doing for the holiday that are not going to be interrupted. Say it a little bit more kindly than that, but I'm going to go follow through on my family traditions. And maybe you're going to be out of town. Maybe you're going to be out of touch. Maybe you're going to be doing something else. And you can say, hey, I'd like to see where this goes. But as far as holidays go, or as far as what my family celebrations look like, they're mine for this year. And I'm just going to be doing that. And it's okay to communicate those expectations.
It's that first step to communicating what your needs and your wants and your boundaries are. So it's never a bad time to start to have those conversations with the person you're seeing.
Right. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope you got some value out of it. It's so tricky to navigate this. So if there is anything missing or anything specific that you would like us to discuss regarding first dates or new relationships during the holiday season, please drop us a line at soyou'readytodate@gmail.com so that we can come back around and we can talk about it and we can help you walk through this minefield and rocky terrain to come out the other side, hopefully very unscathed and excited about the relationship that maybe you're starting right now.
I feel like we've just kind of like hit the tip of the iceberg when it comes to like dating and holidays and all this stuff. So I'm sure there's plenty more that we could discuss. So yeah, drop us a line if there's anything more that we missed or you want us to elaborate further on or just talk about more. We're willing to do that.
And we will see you next week with an all new episode in our mini series. So don't forget to come back and listen so that we can help you continue to navigate this minefield. And I don't really remember what it is, but I am crossing my fingers that it is all about gift giving.
We're maybe doing some rearranging here.
Come back and find out what it is.
That's right. See you next time.